In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Hello, you all wonderful 5 million people, or 8 billion people. I'm trying to do a bit of Russell Brand. Um, Welcome to another Monday lessons from my mother. Today we're on lesson 3. So the last two lessons, if we recap them very quickly, the first was to love your father as he is. I've expanded on that in quite a lot of detail, so I don't need to dive in deeper for that. And the second lesson was motivate your child with the truth. And I gave an example of how, I mean, I still remember it, buying that sword, my mother buying that sword for me and promising me something and then delivering it. And what that does to a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old, or even as children grow older, is very, very, very important for their psyche. So those were the other two lessons, the first two lessons. Now, the third lesson is one thing at a time. Now, let me preface that by saying I have a lot of friends who enjoy multitasking. I have a lot of friends who do that. And you may take umbrage on this fact, or you may have an issue with what I'm going to say, but I've seen it work. And if you speak to people who are successful in your fields or any fields, or are efficient in their work, they would tell you the same thing. So this is what my mother used to say. I wish I was shooting over there so I could show you practically, but I'll just show you by example. So this is one notebook, and this is another notebook. So my mother used to say, and still does, is take one notebook, remove everything else from the table, just the notebook, you and a pen, or you and a copy, so you can make notes or make notes on the book. Open this, start from page 1, go to page 2, 3, 4, page 2000, finish it, put it to the side, and start the next one. Well, somebody's writing to me in the chat who's buy followers. No, Tornado Padre. No, I don't want to buy followers. No, but thank you for writing on Twitch. So this is the second notebook. You pick the second notebook and you start reading it and analyzing it from the first page and going on. What a lot of people in my school and even in Oxford, I've seen people do this. This is good. That is good. Let me take that third book. Let me take that fourth book. Let me try to do these 5 things at the same time. Oh, let me Google it on the internet while I have 3 books open and I have multiple windows open. And I'm working. It makes me feel like I'm working really hard because I have these multiple windows open and I'm reading these multiple books. It's inefficient. When I was younger, because I used to, my attention wouldn't focus in one place because I was full of energy, so I would look at everything around me. And yeah, she analyzed this about me. And as I grew older, I realized it's all about efficiency and focus and ease. Because when you're at the gym and you're lifting weights, I haven't seen anybody eat a sandwich while they're lifting weights. Physically, it's possible. While you're doing a bench press, you can ask your spotter to say, to slide a sandwich in your mouth and you just eat it, or a bubble or a chewing gum or ice cream. Just say, hey, I'm doing 5 reps. Just could you give me an ice cream? People don't do that. When people are running, when people run or jog or cycle, I don't see them writing their thesis while cycling. There are a lot of activities that really don't overlap. That physically it's not impossible to do, but it's hard to do, so people don't do it, and thank God for that. But try writing a thesis while riding a bike, and you wouldn't be able to focus on either. But when we're driving, we tend to check our phone and change the music and watch a movie, do 10 other things, have a conversation with whoever's sitting behind, and it's impractical, and that leads to a lot of accidents as well. And I remember Michael Jordan being on Oprah's show one day with Charles Barkley, I think, and they were having a discussion on whether one should ride motorbikes or not. And Michael Jordan is the GOAT in basketball. So I take what he says very seriously. And he was saying to Charles was saying, "Oh, riding a motorcycle is so different, man. It's so hard to do. I can't do it. It's dangerous." And Michael said, "Listen, you don't have the winning mindset." He took a dig at him, but then he said, "When you're riding a motorbike, you're not chewing on your food, you're not checking your phone, you're not changing the music, you're fully focused on the road. And that's where you get to solve whatever that you get to navigate it. When if you ride it properly, obviously you can do it wrong. But the way Michael was making the argument was that it's beneficial for us to reduce distraction rather than increase it. Distractions don't work in our favor if they occur repeatedly. A welcome distraction in the middle of intense focus is always helpful because it allows you to recoup, rejuvenate, and reapply. But otherwise, trying to do multiple things at the same time does not work. So my mother used to say, clean the table, empty table, take one book, sit, start. Don't set it all up. Oh, I need a lamp here, and I need lighting here, and I need multiple books, and I need the best pen, and it looks like you're working hard without actually working hard. So there's this tale in Haryana in India, and maybe it's in other cultures too, about the jungle when they had an election for someone to be the king of the jungle. And surprisingly, the monkey got elected. I don't know. It's just a fable. The monkey got elected, and then the other jungle residents came to the monkey with their problems. And one of them, I can't remember what, if it were a cow or a goat, and she came to the monkey and said, "My child is lost." And the monkey jumped from tree to tree, branch to branch, swung here, dove there, and all around that, and did a lot of things. And then said, "I couldn't find your child." And she said, "But what am I going to do?" And he said, um, what did he say? Oh, it was something along the lines of, I can't solve this problem, but did you see the effort I put in? So effort without result is still effort, but it's meaningless almost if it's not going towards a particular result. Otherwise, you could just put effort in anything and have no result. So what she was trying to teach us is it's less important to look like you're doing something and more important to actually do it. So when my mother was younger, she would study in a small, I mean, I don't have one in this house, but you see that thing in the background. It was that kind of a small opening in the roof of her house, and she would climb up there. She had good lighting from the window, and she would sit there and study for 7 to 8 hours. And she went from just middle class circumstances to a doctor and a doctorate. And I mean, she just climbed all this way, and she would impart all that wisdom to us. And we would say, "No, but I want to be able to read in one book and then the other book, and she'd say, "No, there's no point of scattering your focus." Robert Berry, what's going on, Mr. Pasha? What's going on, Mr. Berry? It's good to see you. We have to do another session together, Robert. It's time. It's time we do another one. So yeah, let's speak soon. But yeah, the lesson here, and and I remember saying this to my friends who are multitaskers, and they would always have an issue. No, well, you know what? I can talk on the phone and do X and do this and do that. And this was in the early 2000, 2005, 10, and so forth. And people were really celebrating the multitasking. Oh, if somebody can multitask, their XYZ. And now the research is saying deep focus is much better than multitasking. You can Google research after research, which tells you how inefficient multitasking is and how efficient deep focus is. And when I read the deep focus research a couple of years ago at Oxford, I was like, you people just keep on surprising. And by you people, I mean the research community, which I'm also a part of, because it's almost like a fashion to say, oh, this is in fashion today, multitasking, and now the fashion is gone, so let's create a new one. But I always go back to the lesson that my mother taught, which was one thing at a time and focus on it, do it, then move to the next thing. So I have friends who try to cook and pack for a vacation and finish a thesis finish an essay, and do their laundry all at the same time. And what that does is A, it's incredibly inefficient, but B, their stress level just goes here. And they're like doing all those things, and they can't, even when they sit still at night, they're like this: have I missed anything? Have I missed anything? And their trait neuroticism just goes higher and higher, where they're never satisfied. Even when they're on holiday, they're like, okay, I can't shut it off. And and if this were 10, 15 years ago, I would have welcomed or assumed people to come and say to me, well, Ali, you haven't been very busy, so you don't know what it's like. But that whiteboard speaks differently. My career as an architect, my careers in politics and government, and now work in academia while running a company, while giving a TED talk and writing, it speaks differently. So there's no problem with having lists written. Ooh, how do I written and in your mind? There's no problem with that. But when you're doing a task, do one thing at a time, do it properly, do it perfectly, as perfect as you can, or do it excellently, so it's not left wanting, and then move to the next thing. And you'll realize when you try to do six things at the same time, or when you try to do one after the other, they almost take around the same time. Sometimes the one after the other is faster, but all the time it's more efficient and the quality is better. Now, some of you might come back to me and say, well, some people need stimulation and they need this and they need that. So it works differently for different people. No, it doesn't. You can speak to any psychologist worth their salt. It does not work differently for different people. There is an efficient model of getting things done. And I may sound too much like an ENTJ or an engineer or whatever you like, but there is an efficient model. So when we are children, your theory is correct. Everybody has their own path. But as we grow older in the academic, the business, the political, the technical worlds, it's not just about creativity, because too much creativity is also dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous to be very, very, very creative, because then you are stimulated by everything and you can't focus and you can't rest. So we see cases of all these wonderful actors like the great Heath Ledger, who's always stimulated. His brain, if you watch his interviews with Ellen, you'd realize he kept saying, my brain never shuts off. Ehsan Gul is asking a question: how to stop the urge of doing other things on the list while you are deeply focused tasks? I struggle with this at times. Ehsan, thank you first of all for sharing. So this is what I do, because that's a very good question, because I don't have the same level of focus that my mother does. So if I'm working on something, like sometimes I have a paper to write, like a journal article, and I also have a pitch for a company, and I also have an email, and I also have this. I have like five things, and they're on the list. When I'm writing the paper, around the first third or something, when I've done the lit review, I get bored of it. I'm like, oh, this is so boring, because I don't like sitting. So I don't have my mother's level of powered focus. So what I do at that point, well, let me just leave you a question as it is there. So whoever's watching. So when I do that, after I've given the paper like an hour or so, I close the document. I get up, I walk around, I do something, I walk around, I take a drink or something, and I come back and start something else. So you can do other things on the list after a period of focus. I had a very good friend at Oxford called Garrett Bullock, and Garrett's from the US. And Garrett used to inspire me, because him and my flatmate Miriam, they would both wake up around 6 or 5 in the morning and go. So Miriam would go for a bike ride or for rowing, and Garrett would go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he'd finish at 6 o'clock in the evening. And Garrett, big shout out to you. I love you. And I remember speaking to Garrett about productivity, and he said, Ali, look, I work only for 50 minutes per hour, and then 10 minutes I take a break. Then 50 minutes per hour and 10 minutes I take a break. And I do it from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every single day. And I watched him do it. And he was a PhD scholar in musculoskeletal or something. It was really really wonderful what he used to do. But that is one way I thought he would deeply focus for 50 minutes and then take 10 minutes off and just walk around, take a drink, watch something online, and then come back to it. The other thing that I've taken from it is that when I come back to it, I start a different task. If I'm bored, if I'm on a deadline, I come back to it. And I've also noticed, and Asan, maybe this applies to you as well, I work really well under pressure. Really, really well under pressure. So when I'm when I have a deadline, as a lot of scholars do, for midnight, and it's 10:30 and you're still writing and editing, then it's completely focused, and you get up and walk, and 1 minute later you're back and fully focused. So what I've started doing is created false deadlines or false stimuli, which makes me more focused on the thing. So if you finish a task early, there's nothing wrong with it. It's always wrong to finish the task late. So you can create a false deadline. So if you are deeply focused on something, you can create a mental deadline like this has to finish in the next 2 hours. It has to finish. If it doesn't finish, X will happen. So then the focus will continue and the other tasks will lose in priority. So I hope that was helpful, because those are things that I do, but they always come from what my mother has said, and these are strategies that she has said too. But her focus is definitely better than mine. She would get up and come back. I remember when my mother was studying for her MPhil and PhD, she had two books, one red and one purple, which were this thick. And we would come back from school, and she'd be sitting in a room, in the guest room, on a sofa, on a sofa cum bed, and in front of her, with her legs crossed, and there was a pillow in front of her. And on the pillow, a book was open, and she would be sitting like this and reading it and memorizing it. If anybody has ever memorized the Quran, this is how it happens. My pleasure, Asan. We'll talk again. We'll talk again soon, and love to hear about your progress. So my mother would be memorizing like this, and I remember coming from school every day and watching that purple book. First, it was one page, then 30, then 50, then 100, then 1,000, then 2,000, all done. And then the purple book was on the table, and the red book was done. And then 2 months later, the purple book was back, and the red book was. And then she did that for a couple of months. And now, even today, you can say to my mom, can you remember what was on page 534 of that purple book? And she'd be like, yeah, it was this diagram and this paragraph and this, and she'd remember all of it. And thankfully, I have a bit of that memory too, because I memorized the Quran and I can still memorize speeches very easily. But it all comes from the efficiently working brain. So try to, I've gone over time, I know, try to cut away distractions as much as you can. And the best way to do it is one thing at a time. When you're doing a push-up, you don't start doing lunges. Okay, you don't start taking a sip of water while you're doing push-ups or watching a film or having a conversation. I know some people can do it, but it's not efficient. And an efficient mind is ready for taking risks, which an inefficient mind wouldn't. Okay, so if it's sounding too much like Tony Robbins or Jordan Petersonish, I understand. But a lot of common sense is common between all these speakers and my mother. So hopefully, while I'm in England, I'll get her on the show a couple of times to come and elaborate why she had a certain perspective. But for lesson 3, one thing at a time. Please remember, I know this may offend some people. I know some people may take issue with it. Fair enough. You have a different approach to life, but I'm telling you, this is the most efficient and probably, and I say efficiency because some people might say, well, maybe I don't want to be efficient. Maybe I just want to have fun. Having fun at work is wonderful. But if you're employed by someone, they'll tell you it's not all fun and games. If you speak to anybody who has been successful, they'll tell you it's not all fun and games. And then you might say, well, maybe I don't want to be successful. And fair enough, you don't want to be successful. But then when you're looking at other people making more money than you, or you're looking at other people getting the opportunities that you wanted, you might rethink that perspective. And you might say, well, maybe a little bit of success might be good for me. I'm very simple. I'm driven. I'm ambitious. I'm focused towards success. I want to reach the top. So that's how I live life in whatever I do. When I go running, I'm a novice at long distance running. I try to compete with the best runners. And I say, okay, one day I'm going to catch you. That's just my mentality. If it doesn't work for you, fair enough. But this is where I come from. And therefore, one thing at a time will always work. Thank you so much for joining me. I shall see you next week.